morning, distinguished guests and fellow students. Professor Stark Maskin is an American economist who was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2007 for having laid the foundations of mechanism design theory. He is Albert O. Hirschman's Professor of Social Science at the Institute of Advanced Study and is a visiting lecturer at Princeton University. Professor Maskin graduated from Tenafly High School in New Jersey in 1968 and attended Harvard University, where he received his A.B. in mathematics and a Ph.D. in applied mathematics. After he earned his doctorate, Professor Maskin went to the University of Cambridge in 1976, where he was a research fellow at a Cambridge college. He taught at Massachusetts Institute of Technology from 1977 to 1984 and from 1985 to 2000 at Harvard University, where he was a Lewis Berkman Professor of Economics. In 2000, he moved to the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Professor Maskin has worked in diverse areas of economic theory, such as game theory, the economic of incentives, and contract theory. He's particularly well known for his papers on mechanism design theory and dynamic games. His current research projects include comparing different electoral rules, studying coalition formation, and examining the causes of inequality. Today, Professor Maskin will discuss globalization and why global markets haven't reduced the inequality. We hope to get an insight into globalization and its promise of wealth distribution, what factors have caused a rapid increase of it, and an analysis of trade. We at NIST are indeed privileged and fortunate to have Professor Maskin visit us and share his experiences and theories. It is my honor to welcome Professor Maskin to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm especially looking forward to your questions later on. So I intend to speak really only for a little while, for 10 minutes or so, and we'll say a few words about globalization from the standpoint of the work that I've been doing, but I really want to hear from you. Let me begin by just saying a few words about how I got into economics and into the problems of economic inequality. As the introduction that you just heard informed you, I actually started out on a mathematical track. So I got very interested in math when I was in high school, about your age, and I continued with math as an undergraduate in college. And I might well have continued along that path had I not fortuitously taken a class in economics from one of the great figures of economics. I didn't know he was one of the great figures then, but I certainly found out later. His name is Kenneth Arrow. He's still around, and he actually became my PhD advisor years later. But he taught a wonderful course on economics, an inspiring course, which showed me that economics offers many of the same attractions as pure mathematics. That is, it's a very rigorous subject. The language that's used to express modern economic ideas is the language of mathematics. It's quantifiable. You can actually test your theories in a thoroughgoing and precise way. And yet, at the same time, it has a strong human element to it. That is, economics has the potential to be extremely useful to society, to illuminate the problems that societies around the world face, and also to perhaps formulate solutions to those problems. And I found this combination of rigor on the one hand and the potential to do some social good on the other irresistible. And I decided to change course and to move into economics. I got a PhD in what's called applied mathematics, but if you look at what I really did as a graduate student, it was largely economics, and I worked with Kenneth Arrow, and that changed my life. Well, I mentioned a moment ago that economics has the potential for helping us understand big social problems. One such social problem, of course, is the problem of inequality, economic inequality. I probably don't have to explain why it is that we don't like inequality, but let me just offer a few reasons that you may well find persuasive. The first is simply the egalitarian argument. We are, after all people. There is nothing inherently special about any of us, and so it offends our moral sensibilities if some of us have opportunities and rewards far exceeding those of others. So there's an egalitarian impulse which says that that there's something inherently problematic about inequality. That isn't to say that we necessarily want absolute egalitarianism either, but the gaps between rich and poor in many countries around the world are so large that it's hard to argue that they serve a useful social function. A second reason for being concerned about inequality is that, particularly in developing countries, the people at the bottom are very badly off indeed. That is, they're not only less rich than the people at the top, but they are often living in appalling conditions, well below what we label as the official poverty line. And so even if we don't care about inequality per se, we may well worry about people who are living in dire poverty. And then there's a third reason for worrying about inequality, perhaps a more practical reason, but an important reason nonetheless, and that is that societies which are extremely unequal tend to be less stable, both socially and politically, than those where inequality is less. And so just from the standpoint of social coherence, political coherence, there is a reason for worrying about extreme inequality. Well, my own work has focused on inequality in developing countries, particularly, because that's where the problem is most acute. So rather than worrying about the United States or France or Japan, I've concentrated on countries like Mexico or Cambodia or Senegal. Actually, Mexico is one in particular that I have looked at in great detail. And one question to ask about inequality is how to solve it, how to address the problem. Well, if you would ask that question to development economists 30 years ago, many of them would have given the answer that globalization was the key to solving the problems of inequality. What do I mean by globalization? I mean the increase in trade of goods and services across international boundaries and the increase of production of those goods and services between countries. And in fact, as you're probably aware, we have seen a tremendous globalization move in the last 30 years. This globalization was fueled by dramatic decreases in transportation costs and dramatic decreases in communication costs and coordination costs, so that we see much more international trade and we see much more international production than 30 years ago. But what has been the economic consequence of that globalization? Well, one thing we have certainly seen is many countries have indeed got richer as a result. If you look at the GDP per capita, which is a measure that economists are fond of using, gross domestic product per capita, that has risen in ways that are directly attributable to globalization in a very large number of countries around the world, including many developing countries, particularly in Asia and particularly in Latin America. Not so much, I'm afraid, in Africa. And the two most dramatic examples of success through globalization have probably been China and India, which are still developing countries, but which have come a long way thanks to global markets. But at the same time, as we've seen this increase in GDP per capita in many developing countries, we've also seen a dramatic increase in inequality. So actually globalization has made the inequality problem worse than before, not better. And Mexico is a good example of what globalization has done. Mexico, as you may know, joined what is called the North American Free Trade Agreement about 15 years ago. And it was a success for Mexico insofar as increasing GDP. GDP has risen on the order of 8% or so as a direct result of